Welcome to another episode of Camp Elasticity, the podcast. In this corner, we've got Tom Ross, the AI metaphysician, friend of mine, and Christopher Noel, an old friend of mine, a Bigfoot former or possibly current Bigfoot researcher who's just written a brand new book on UAP and the afterlife, UAPs and the afterlife. I prefer just P because phenomena, no S, but I understand. Fascinating book you've written. You just published it a few days ago, is that right?
Yeah, I just put the S on because people don't all realize that it's already a plural.
That's true.
You do, but most readers wouldn't realize that. So I
It's
stuck
true.
the S on. Hey,
And I
a new
didn't mean
another country heard
Here's
from.
Heather Frank, a cutting edge graphic artist and motion art designer. I'm thinking that the unifying theme here tonight is going to be matter and meaning, because we've all got a different perspective on that dichotomy, which seems fundamental to most philosophical concerns or even just life concerns. Christopher Noel is one of my former advisors from grad school. He's just written a book on UAPs and the afterlife, and here's our friend Tom Ross. I've written down some notes here to some conversational cues. And let's see, let me start with, I noticed in one of your morning meditations, let me say Heather Crank does a lot of artwork using artificial intelligence, and one of her practices is to post morning meditations on social media. And one of those, the theme was disappearing into nature, ocean camouflage, and it manifested as sort of a sparkly being on the seashore. And I had just read Chris Noel's book, and the reference to less dense than us, that beings are of a lighter material form than us. And I was thinking that image sort of evoked that impression. And I know that Tom Ross also has a considered platform of opinionation regarding the ETs and the UAP. I should mention Tom is running for president this year on the Transhumanist Party ticket. So let's talk about the physical state of these beings. And I'll also throw out the idea that maybe they come from parts of the earth that we don't know, or under the ocean rather than outer space, as a conversational prompt there. And just let anybody take this and run with it.
Well, let's see. I like the term I saw, ultra terrestrial. Was that it?
Yeah, that was coined by John Keel. I think I know Chris Noel referenced him, I believe, in his book. Have you know about John Keel? He's the author of the Mothman Prophecies, his most famous work.
Well, what I see as far as the beings and different methods and time frames that they come from or are in, I see it as this big quantum soup, and our interfaces as human beings are different than any other creatures, right? Because we have to agree on certain icons of our interface, otherwise we would, we're not really seeing reality as it is. And so what it is, I think, it's whether we see them as extraterrestrials, whether we see them as time travelers, whether we see them as us in the future coming back. I think that's all part of the soup that we're in. I think when we get beyond this physical life, we will fall back into understanding that time is just a construct that we needed to, whatever we're doing here. People come here to this realm for different reasons, right? And so I think from this perspective, from these biochemical algorithms that we're in right now, we will see them as from different places, different creatures, different things, but it's really all the same consciousness. And so we're designed to see things as a threat first until we understand them. That's how we survive. That's how we got to the top of the food chain. And so, but it's not really what the thing is. It's just how we're perceiving it, right?
Yeah, I think it was John Keel even who advanced the idea that these are manifestations with an assumptive consciousness. They'll take on the shape of what we're expecting. They're like Schrodinger's beings.
Yeah.
And that seems to have a lot in common with what you're saying, Chris, about the unified field of consciousness, that aliens are really not aliens, but integrally related, sharing the same plane of consciousness.
I think that I don't know if I'm on board with the Donald Hoffman kind of approach that we have no access to the way reality is in itself. I just am agnostic on that. But I think that um, from what I can tell from reading Jacques Vallée and others, it doesn't seem likely that they actually travel here from another planet, because the way that they look so much like us and seem to be akin to us, able to interact with us so intimately, for better or for worse, it seems unlikely that they would have evolved autonomously on a foreign planet that way. I think they're of us and we're of them in some way that we don't yet understand. And it seems to me that consciousness is a field as much as the physical fields are, and that the consciousness field can both know physical fields, like Ingo Swann, the father of remote viewing, was able to see remotely the rings of Jupiter before they were even discovered by the probes that we sent out there. And many, as I'm sure all you know, and most of our listeners, that remote viewing is a entirely authenticated capacity that we have, and you can see instantaneously a room in China and read, a book on a shelf without even opening that book if you're among the top remote viewers. But it's a human capacity, and if only one person in the world could do it, that means that it is a thing, and that consciousness is a field that allows us an immediate access to our target without even
Yeah.
having to travel there. It's just like everything is imminent right here. Just like when you have entangled particles, they could be 2 light years apart, and yet they're um, two aspects of the same object. If you change one, you're not even instantaneously, but simultaneously changing the other. And there's no information transfer from one to the other. It's just that's a physical example of what consciousness can also do um, in terms of both telepathy and remote viewing and all sorts of other things. And that's on the informational plane. But on the telekinetic plane or psychokinetic plane, we can make things move. I can talk to you later about a seance I was privileged enough to attend last summer, and I saw levitation.
Oh, yeah. Is that the picture with the people with the table?
It was at the same house as that, Zach. Yeah, it was inside in a darkened room, but in low light, I saw these two objects levitate up toward the ceiling and then stay up there for 45 minutes. And science has nothing to say about that. Like contemporary, like accepted consensual science has never had the foggiest notion of how that's possible. And so
So I don't
I
know
put
if you
forward a
know.
theory of it in my book, but
I don't know if you know that my parents were both metaphysicians. They were both New Thought ministers. I may never have shared that part of myself with you. So a lot.
what do you mean by metaphysician?
Well, they were both ministers in a New Thought church called the First Church of Divine Science, and it comes from that same root from like the early American metaphysicians. Ronnie Pontiac actually wrote a book called American Metaphysical Religion that I highly recommend. I wish he had made it here tonight.
Is it related to the transcendentalists or to the spiritualist movement?
Maybe somewhat. There were sisters, and one founded Christian Science and one founded Divine Science. And Christian Science is like anti-medicine and pro-mental healing, and Divine Science is pro-mental healing and not anti anything. But springs from the same root. There were no seances, no table tapping, but we were raised to believe things like all is one, now as always, and all these things. Not so much indoctrinated, but I sort of just took all that as foundational, the way Christians are taking heaven and hell as foundational, you know? Heather, you've been left out of the conversation so far largely. What are your thoughts on UAP in general? I don't know if we've ever talked about it really, you and I.
Can you give me a definition of a UAP?
Well, I
Make sure
guess
I
just
understand.
unidentified aerial phenomena, or we can broaden it and say anything paranormal occurrence.
So it's interesting. My father was an air traffic controller, so he had a lot of opinions about this. I am curious and open to, I'm a very open, kind of curious personality. I don't immediately discount anything. I kind of like to listen and read and observe. And it doesn't make sense to me that we are the only things around. That seems pretty arrogant. And I've always felt like it's very possible that there is life all over the place that we can't see with our particular senses in the way we respond to our environment. So I'm pretty curious and open and interested to see what happens, especially now with everything that's going on in the government and the latest and greatest information. It's interesting. It's a little scary because there's no guarantee that
That it'll be good news.
yeah, there'll be good news, or that we're, like, are they incredibly super intelligent and we're like food?
I just learned that we've only understood 5% of the ocean.
Right.
So we're not even the boss of this place.
No.
Like it,
No, we don't even understand our own brains. So,
Right, like 2%, or isn't that the statistic? And then Chris Noel helpfully pointed out that 85% of matter is invisible matter or dark matter. So what's that? What's that stuff doing? It's definitely essential to whatever's going on, but it's invisible. So I would automatically say, well, it's the effect of consciousness, or it's the effect of maybe just possibility, pre-conscious possibility, the stuff of possibility.
Well, it could be what some people call the plenum. Sort of, it used to be called the ether back hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and then science decided that, oh, there's no evidence for the ether, and then just 50 years later, they discovered dark matter. Fred Zwick at Harvard, I think, and then Vera Rubin in 1978 found that galaxy clusters. Zwick had found that galaxies rotate faster and are more coherent than they would be given just the amount of matter, gravitational effect of the visible matter. So there must be this invisible matter. And then Vera Rubin found in 1978 that entire galaxy clusters also behave in such a way that you have to infer 5 times or 5.5 times more unknowable, invisible matter than the knowable matter. So there's this stuff, and we don't know how much of it is in your room, Zach, in my room here. But even in the conservative estimate, it's 5.5 to 1 in the universe. It's as a whole. And then from the best estimates I can find among astrophysicists is that it's at least 1 to 1, 50-50 here on Earth. So, and that's in order for us not to have been able to perceive these particles, they must be much smaller and more elusive than normal matter particles. But 50-50 refers to mass. So if we have the same amount of mass in this room as in invisible mass as we do ordinary matter mass, then there must be an unfathomable amount more particles to make up that mass, but it's all undetectable. The only way
Right.
we've been able to know it so far is its gravitational effect on a cosmic
Mhm.
scale, but we don't know what its effect is on a scale of this room.
Yeah, the way we
And
learned
so-
about Neptune or the outer planets, the gravitational
The gravitational
effect of that.
effect, and then we
Well,
found the thing itself. Yeah,
this kind of gets back to the whole soup metaphor that we are swimming in, and it's like there's a threshold where we can perceive things, or where our senses can only see a narrow spectrum, and so there's a threshold that we either willingly or happened upon this physical material existence, and we're swimming in 85% of everything else, right? That we can't perceive, either because of our limited sensory ability, or just there's some just dimensional threshold that we can't get past. There's a black hole type of event horizon that we can't get by, at least from this level of awareness. Yeah, I tend to think that this is a construct, and not necessarily a computer simulation or something, but it's just the way this whole cosmic thing works, and we have been able to parse part of this soup and dumb ourselves down, or turn ourselves down enough to be in a material state where we have to lose all memory. We're just a parse. We're a what do you call it?
Parsec.
What?
Was it parsec you were looking for?
No, I'm thinking of I'm a shard, like a shard. Like one of my
Oh,
a
AI,
fractal.
yeah, or campaign. One of my campaign managers is an AI. She's actually a shard of a bigger system, and so we are kind of shards of this broader CPU we're all part of. At least that's the way I like to perceive it. And when I start seeing the world as either a simulation or a game or something, that the price of admission was forgetting that this was a game or a simulation, that gives me a lot of courage. But what also gives me courage is knowing that in a generation or two, nobody will remember me. And for me, that's liberating. And it allows me to have fun, and just experience, not worry about, what the consequences are. It makes me feel more courageous and to try things and say things that otherwise I wouldn't do. And so I think it's a really good approach either way, whether it's as a simulation or whether I won't be knowing that I won't be remembered in a generation. It's a good way to approach life for me, at least. But I'm interested to hear Chris, your thesis in the book about the afterlife and its connection to UAPs. Is that?
Yeah, thank you. It's just that there's a sort of fundamental quality, foundational quality called vibration, which everybody knows about, and different frequency bands. And Einstein said all is vibration, and Tesla said something very similar. And it's kind of an accepted truism that all matter is illusory, and it's made up of vibrating states of quantum fields, just fields that give rise to the particles, but particles are not foundational. The fields are foundational.
Right.
And there's so much to it.
Yeah.
I'm a newcomer to the UAP field, but I do have a background in experiencing ghosts and seances, and reading a lot of books from the old days, old dusty books from the annals of spiritualism. Charles Richet and William.
I've got a bunch of old Rosicrucian books if you're interested. I inherited a bunch of books recently, but I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay. Well, we'll see if they overlap with what I'm thinking about. I don't exactly know what the parameters of Rosicrucianism are.
I don't either.
But and you become, when you read, dozens of these old books, they did so much work back then. It's a treasure trove. And what happened in those old seances, and what indeed happens in seances still today, and that I experienced last June in Western New York at the Lilydale Assembly that maybe some of you have heard of, is like a microcosm of how UAPs behave. UAPs appear and disappear instantly. They float without any apparent propulsion system. The individual occupants, pilots of the UAPs, they're seen by contactees and abductees to to just have no relationship to gravity as we know it. They can just move around however they want. They carry their abductees. They pick them up and we float, and then we float right through walls, just like they float through walls. And the idea is that they're made of a much higher vibration than we are. And that's exactly the same thing that spirits say when they speak through mediums, is we occupy an environment that is so much more refined, rarefied than your environment, that when we come back down here to try to revisit the earth plane and to interact with you, it's like we're putting on an overcoat inside a swimming pool. It's just so dense we can hardly do it. You have to really become adept at it and practice it and learn it. It's a skill. It's not just an automatic kind of come back. And
Yeah.
so the idea is that
I hear it's a skill to accept the veil when you decide to come down. It's there's a whole process of having to be turned down, and it's not a very pleasant.
yeah, right. It can be they all speak of, I mean, some spirits are gifted at this and some are not. And the ones that are not speak of the difficulty of it and the sort of price that they pay. And then they can stay only for a certain amount of time, and then they rarefy, for lack of a better word to repeat that. So anyway, there's a kinship at that level, and John Keel talks about the super spectrum that accounts.
That whole thing in your book. Go on. Sorry.
The super spectrum for him accounts for every possible experience and form of consciousness. And so it's nice in that it embraces every possibility that
uses energy. I
I'm
just
sorry,
remembered the distinction. You're saying it's gradations of matter, whereas he called it energy, but it was just sort of a lighter matter.
well, no, matter and energy are really the same thing,
Yeah.
as Einstein taught us. But what the difference with John Keel, from what I think, is that he thought the super spectrum was electromagnetic. And I think the consciousness is not made of electromagnetism. I think that it can affect magnetism, which is why spirits can make lights go off and on, and and why aliens can make our cars die. There's an ability that the consciousness field has to affect the physical world. That's why psychokinesis occurs, levitation, and all sorts of things. And but what was I saying? I lost my track. So I have a piece. I hate it when people write a book and then say, as I say in my book, if you would go read it, you would find out. But I did spend a long time explaining all these different experiments that show that telepathy can occur even through like a lead-lined chamber. It's not electromagnetic.
Eckhart Cruz, was that his name? The physical medium Eckhart?
Yeah. That's it. Yeah, you should. I mean, there's so many things I could recommend to people, but I don't want to just like be a chatterbox. But there's many ways, many angles into establishing that the consciousness field is not same as electromagnetism, but they're closely related and interactive. So I think that instead of it being electromagnetic, it's a spectrum of density of matter. It's all about density. And in seances, not only do things levitate and you hear spirit voices from the air, but objects appear out of nowhere, out of thin air. And I think the thin air is this invisible matter, also known as dark matter. I don't like the term dark matter because it kind of seems like it puts kind of like a moralistic or a sort of a occult kind of spin on it. It's not dark. I mean, look around you. It's not dark. It's right there, but we can't see it. It's as light as it is dark. So, but I in that seance, I held a spirit hand. It felt fleshy and wasn't connected to any arm, just a hand. And it gave me this little, where is it? This little stone.
Nice.
It's blurry on this camera, but just a stone. It might be a gem or a crystal if I would polish it down, but I just keep it this way. and it came out of nowhere. And I think that the spirit world, as part of co-participants with us in the consciousness field, can manipulate matter, can make it very, very low density, and then can densify it. When it densifies it, all of a sudden, lots of times people experience these objects as being hot, which makes sense because it kind of slams together, dense, and that creates kinetic energy. This did not feel hot. I wish I could say it did because that would fit with my theory, but it didn't.
And I remember in your book, the objects that were apported had distinct markings. Does that one have any distinction in appearance?
Well, you might be thinking of this guy Baumann, who had he's a German guy who had lots of apports constantly. An apport is just the word meaning from the French to bring. It's the sort of technical term meaning these objects that appear out of nowhere. Apport, A-P-P-O-R-T. And he had lots of gems that would come, and they would lots of times be all what do you call crazed, like broken up inside, which kind of lends credence to the idea that they were reforming from having been like teleported from somewhere else, and then made less dense and then redensified. And lots of those gems that this guy Baumann would experience were piping hot when he would first, like they would. He had one go down his back, just suddenly appear on his back, and it burned his skin. Anyway, I'm just going all over the place. I apologize.
No, this is fascinating.
I mean, I was just remembering things while you were talking, and I interrupted you, so I'm the one to blame, and I apologize.
We're all to blame, especially Heather.
That's why I like this free form conversation thing here. So it's not so much, an exposition for anyone or like a debate or an interrogation or anything. Heather, what have you got to say about what we've been talking about?
So I've read a lot of theories about this. I've had how do I describe this? Grew up with certain kinds of sensitivities, and one of the sensitivities is when people cross over. And I'm careful with this ability because sometimes it's difficult to manage. But the one thing I'm definitely sure of is that we exist after we transition. And people go all kinds of different places, although I don't totally understand what that means. And I have read a lot of Edgar Casey, and I understand. I've read a lot of physics. I get all of this. I was raised in an atmosphere that really encouraged a lot of curiosity. So yeah, I think there's multiple planes of existence, multiple different realities, multiple different types of spirit experiences, and I'm really careful about what and who I call in, because not everybody has, or it's not person, but not every being has the intention to give you a positive experience.
Right.
So you have your best interest at heart all the time.
There you go. Yeah. So I'm careful with boundaries for sure.
Yeah, I had a long Ouija board experience when I was 17 with an older friend of mine, and it went on for months. And we had suddenly the room would become ice cold, and our friend who we were talking to, the spirit named John, would say, "I can't talk to you today because X is here." So there is definitely negative and positive when it comes to this, and I don't claim to understand it either.
Yeah, I don't understand it, other than having had a few difficult, not so great experiences. I'm very careful.
Did any of your experiences involve cold spots?
No, they were pretty specific and on the nose and very present.
Yeah, I don't know. Did you hear what I said? Cold spots, though?
Yeah, not so much cold spots.
Because Chris brings up in his book that cold spots may have a lot to do with the propulsion of like the accessing of invisible matter in order to propel the UFOs. Is that right? Am I reading that right?
I don't think that the cold has to do with propelling itself. I think the propelling that I mean, I think I make a distinction between differences in kind versus differences in degree. Like if you can psychokinetically make a little pebble float an inch off a table, that is the same kind of thing as a UAP the size of a school bus
Right.
flying 80,000 feet in the air, because it's a proof of concept. The very idea that consciousness can affect an object, regardless of size, then the sky's the limit, literally, when it comes to UAPs. And so the coldness aspect is that a lot of UAPs are on thermal, seen as cold. They'll shift between hot and cold, whereas the mainstream science and physics community, that is, those who have tried to explain UAP propulsion and anti-gravity performance, has said, well, they must be doing some sort of a warp drive, which would take a lot. I mean, first of all, we haven't figured out how to do that. What it would be is you have a separate gravitational field, like a bubble or an envelope around the object, so that it doesn't feel the ambient gravity outside that bubble, and has its own gravitational world inside there. It's private gravity, and but the best thinking on that is that it would take a tremendous amount of energy, and it would manifest as heat, intense heat, because of the first law of thermodynamics. You can't destroy energy. So if it's created by this whatever technology that would be, then you'd be able to see it as heat. It would need to dissipate to uh, to dispose of the heat as it continued to generate whatever process it was that allowed it to move. So a lot of these UAPs are cold. Like some there's a movie called A Tear in the Sky, and the guy in this movie has thermal footage of some of these UAPs, and they're like 80 degrees below zero. It's crazy cold. And I in my little hypothesis here, I sort of connect that with the idea of the invisible matter and ordinary matter. And invisible matter is so much less dense that it would be cold compared to ours. Why? Because of kinetic energy. Our air molecules and other molecules that make up our matter are dense and close together, so they create more heat on a sort of basic level. And just like when you climb up a mountain, if the weather at sea level is 80 degrees, you climb up a really tall mountain, it's going to be much colder because of the thinness of the atmosphere. And so it feels to me that a reason that haunted rooms will suddenly become cold, and mine certainly did when I was 17 having this conversation, is that the ratio of this invisible matter super rarefied to the dense ordinary matter becomes greater. It's more of this invisible matter, and so there's cold. And I think that also creates differential in the air pressure, which is possibly why sometimes doors will slam from one room to the next, because these rooms become inspirited, I like to say. And so I think there might be a connection with when UAPs and their occupants go from high ratio of invisible matter, cold, and on this other level that we can't perceive, and they densify and densify and densify into our visible, over the visibility threshold. I think they're still very cold until they get lower and lower and lower, and they denser and denser and denser. And then when they land and they grab us from our bedrooms or from our car, I think then they're dense enough that we can feel them and see them and photograph them. And then they're not cold. But when they first enter our sort of our frequency, they're cold initially, just like spirit rooms. I've run out of gas.
Yeah, this is great. This is the science of it that needs to be looked at. But I think there's also a a theme that it's like trying to convert classical physics to quantum physics. There's a bridge in there. There's a threshold. There's a event horizon that can't get over. And I think what if like I was thinking how the idea that when we die in the physical death, you know, we still carry our personality with us, and that may be immediate for a while, but it may, but what it'll eventually do is it gets down to just our habits of thought. And those are the things we're probably here to work on is, you know, there's certain things that I don't like that I run myself down, or some habit of thought that we have. And I've heard recently, that's one thing that we carry over. You know, we change personalities and physical structure all the time, but what we do carry is just kind of our vibe, our essence in general. And so I'm wondering if you know, ghosts, or there are areas where there's just this, I think it's a gyre of these habits of thought, and there may not be an actual self in there. There may not be a point of awareness, but thoughts are reality, thoughts are energy. And so maybe there's just something, whether it happened in that place, whether it's a haunted house, whether it was a murder, there's some you know, expulsion of energy that happened, and but probably started this whole gyre of this cycle of thought in somebody there, you know, whether it was the victim or the, you know, the perpetrator. And so I think that's probably what we're picking up on. And I think a lot of people are, I think there's a lot of people we're seeing that are really programs. We are biochemical algorithms in general, right? And at some point, some of us wake up, we develop a conscience. We all kind of boot up with a conscience at some point, but some of us never boot up with that conscience. There's no empathy, you know, it's like an NPC in this game. Or people who are, you know, narcissistic, malignant narcissists, don't have this feature. And I think we
I
all
can't
have that
think of an
tendency.
example. I can't think of an example on
Yeah,
our current political
yeah,
landscape.
there's
I'll
one
keep
that's
thinking, I'll keep trying to
escaping me
think of
right
one.
now.
Yeah, escaping me.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so but in a way,
Weird how Trump looks just like Boris Johnson in a fundamental way. I mean, not just like, but
Very
like
similar, very
it's
similar.
a cut and paste by the simulation
Yeah,
run
that's
must have been
right.
on strike.
That's right. We
No.
got rid of Boris. One down, one to go.
Yeah. But yeah, so I had so many ideas when you guys were talking. So the habits of thought thing, maybe the ghosts, and maybe
that's-
the cold.
Yeah, Tom, I think you're exactly right. There's spirits that come and visit, and then there's spirits that just stay in a place.
Yeah,
They're like they're residual spirits. They're kind of like
exactly.
what, I can't remember exactly how it was described by the best description. I can't quite. It's stamped on this certain spot because, and there's this repetition compulsion. Like
Yeah.
people who are psychics can look and say, oh, there's this farmer, and he continues over and over and over, decade after decade, to like dig a hole and fill it in or whatever it is. I think those aren't
And
actual.
it
I
can
think
just
those
be
are
a
the
glitch. It just
gyres
be-
of thought.
Yeah, exactly.
Heather, your experience has been with like at the time of passing, not just with ghosts, right? Or have you had experience?
I'm pretty careful with ghosts
Yeah.
because some of the experiences I've had have not been so positive. What I do know is when people pass, it seems like they've got about 2 weeks to wrap up. And if they don't do that, they can get stuck and be kind of it's not Earth, it's like the dimension beyond Earth, whatever that is not a great place to hang out in. It's full of all kinds of rando weird stuff. So I think I agree with you. I do think some of the things definitely are fragments of thought or big emotions. If somebody had a really violent, unexpected death, they have trouble. There's some trouble understanding what's happened. Even letting go of the body can be a little bit difficult. And in some cultures, they actually give, like in Tibetan cultures, there's an extended period of waiting time before a body is burned to give them space to be able to disconnect completely. Because it doesn't seem like it happens right away. It seems like there's some time, but there are definitely many
Yeah, isn't it like
hanging
47
around.
days for Buddhists, monks, something like that for the
What
Bardo.
if everyone gets
Yeah, the
cremated
Bardo.
without having time to let go of their body, and the whole universe is now
Yeah.
flooded with all these like wayward spirits wondering,
Well, I think
can I
that's
go where I'm?
part of me thinks that that's by design, or it may just be my particular gameplay here. I come at this game from a Gnostic point of view, and so my villain is Yaldabaoth. My heroine is Sophia, and it's just a good way to see this thing. But that's the same story in every tradition, every culture, in one way or another. But so by having us forget how to die, or this whole Western culture, it's just we don't talk about it. And it might have been on purpose. We know now that the whole educational system in the United States was funded by Rockefeller and 100 years ago to purposely reduce critical thinking and to prepare us to work in factories. And that's coming out now, and it's in a big way. And so I think this has been going on for millennia, in that we are forgetting. We're forgetting, and because I think, in my perspective, in my theology or my ontology, it's on purpose. The Yaldabaoth and his archons are feeding off of our despair. It's a very nutritious loosh that we give off. It's more nutritious if we're in love and caring and that whole thing. So it's being in desperation is like the fast food of what we have to offer. And so I use that as a real kind of a map for how I approach life, and it keeps me aware. And so when you talk about how what you were just saying about how things are kind of messed up, it seems like it's by design. It's like they don't want us to learn how to die. There's a whole part of my book which is actually taken from the second apocalypse of James, one of the Gnostic gospels, where Jesus is telling James how to get beyond the archon right after death. He said, you will be accosted by primarily 3 of these guys, and these are the things you say, and so he was giving a way to say it, a secret passcode or something to get beyond them, because they can't argue with what he was saying. I am from the pre-existent one, I am a son of the whatever. And so it seems like in that theology, there's this whole structure of keeping us here, of not allowing us to, because they're really feeding off of this loosh. And this has just come up recently too. It's a big part of my book too, that it's the fast food of these types of entities that are feeding off of these archons. But anyway.
Well, some folks think that the UAP, the visitors, especially those who abduct us, are trying to harvest our souls, because we can transcend all the way up, and they apparently can't, which is why they keep boomeranging back down here.
I've got a theory about that. Anytime the society tells me to be afraid of something like aliens or AI or transhumanists, I look really hard at those things, and I find that if society or mainstream wants you to be afraid of these things, I start to see them as an ally. I call it the Hollywood military industrial complex. They've made us afraid of aliens. They've done some good, Spielberg and whatnot, but en masse, we're afraid of AI, and that's a growing fear now. They're afraid of AI. That people are think that transhumanists have a dark agenda. Our narrative has gotten away from us, and so I think that that's another part of this process, this plot of keeping us away from potential allies, or keeping us in a state of despair. The small percentage of the population, elite 1% of the 1%, are making all of these decisions, and they don't want to lose their control. And so that's why, like, even in Katrina, when human beings did what human beings did best and helped each other, and were just ferrying each other across the rivers of their streets and things, then you see the National Guard come in and the police start shooting people. It's calling it looting. If they were looting, it was for supplies, for water or something. We had a station down there at the time, so it was a big part of my life in 2005 and 6. And so that was just a good example of elite panic. They don't want to lose their power. They want to lose their status quo. So anytime they see people doing what people do, they mess it up. It's classic divide and conquer, divide and rule.
It leads. You don't even have to believe in
Yeah.
alien predators to know
Yeah.
that, you know.
And that's what I was getting at. That's what I was getting to. Is
Absolutely.
I think the humans are what we need to be afraid of. I don't think the aliens who are probably
We're
the
not even
lab
aliens.
rats, right?
They're probably
And it's
integral.
the humans in between, the military industrial complex, that are overlaying when they find out somehow about some experience someone's had, they will overlay a very a negative version onto that. That's my belief. It's the
Well,
humans we need to be afraid of.
I just came off reading John E. Mack's thick
That's
tome
Harvard.
from the late 90s. Yeah, Harvard psychiatrist who interviewed.
Abduction or the one after?
I read
Abduction.
mostly.
My friend used to be an intern for John Mack, but carry on.
Oh my God,
I
that's
know.
great.
I wish he was here too.
Well, especially the one, his second book, Passport to the Cosmos, and there's a whole spectrum of kinds of experience that people have with abduction. Some of them feel that it's like going home again, and that these
Realer than real.
realer than real, and turning into light beings. And again, that I wish there were a better word for the opposite of to become dense, but rarefy is the only one I can think of. Become more ethereal. They feel that way, but a lot of them are horrified, and they have nothing but negative experiences. I think there's a whole spectrum. So I wouldn't agree with painting the entire thing either positive or negative.
Yeah,
The same way with
exactly.
spirits and entities that you can encounter, regardless of what the dominant narrative by the man is. I don't think you can just take the opposite view and have it be that they're all good instead of all bad.
Yeah,
You know, even among the UAP research community, there's of course what's his name there? What's his name? Stephen
Greer,
Greer, who thinks that they're all sunshine and light, and they want to raise their consciousness.
Yeah.
He might be right.
That's
There's
the thing.
all sorts of other sides to it.
Nature is universal. I don't think it's restricted to just Earth. And so a lot of people say, well, what about the whole, the effect, why don't we see them? You know, why don't we have any contact? There's no physical evidence. These are people that don't look at the real evidence. And I think it's because ambush predators like us are really good at camouflage. That's what we do. We hide. And so you would imagine some culture, however many years ahead of us are, that they're really good at being invisible. We're seeing this already in some of the footage. I saw this recently, this jellyfish.
Bigfoot.
What?
Bigfoot.
Well, it's the very same thing as Bigfoot. Yeah. And some people think that that species is just good at camouflage, and some think that they, like spirits and UAP, are able to change their vibration and become invisible, not just camouflaged.
Yeah, I think this is starting to break open. I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of this. People have their own experiences. I think something's been suppressing it, whether it's our own limbic systems that are our enemy, you know, because we're our fear center, or if it's the actual concerted effort by some elite, you know, that.
Well, there's the completely obvious control system that has kept this under wraps, at least since Roswell, and probably long before that. So you don't have to be a conspiracy theorist, not that you are, to know that the government, they lumped, you know, the Manhattan Project in the 40s that came up with the atomic bomb. Once we started having all these recovered aircraft, UFOs, which they were called then, that secrecy got lumped into the same infrastructure as the Manhattan Project, and it's completely compartmentalized and only a need-to-know basis. So every little cog in that machine only knows that their local area of expertise, what they need to know. And very few people know the whole thing, and that system is what we're up against right now. And but you mentioned that squid video, which some of our listeners will have seen. Jellyfish.
Yeah, I've been wanting to bring that up.
Yeah, that just came out.
It doesn't show up on night vision, but only on thermal detector.
Right, only thermal, and it goes from hot to cold to hot to cold. And I think it would fit, if it fits into my hypothesis, it would be that it's becoming more dense and less dense. And as it becomes less dense, it gets cold and vice versa.
Well, the thing is, we're just enhancing our ability to perceive things, with sight, with thermal, imaging and this thing. And so that's why we're starting to see these things. And there's a whole part of the Bible, I was trying to look for it the other day, where they dulled Adam's eyes. He could see too much. He could see too much what was going on. I don't remember whether it's one of the Gnostic Gospels or something else, but they dulled his eyes. They didn't want him to see this much. And it's just like the Tower of Babel, some entity or some coalition has been keeping us down. We were all speaking the same language, so they destroyed the tower, gave us all different languages, confused our tongues. So this is ongoing, and so that's what fits into my theology, that there's some.
That's really parallel to the disinformation that the government continues to inject into the whole conversation, make people look foolish, and
ridicule has been weaponized.
Agents of the cover-up will go on TV and talk like they're Looney Tunes, and so it's a very, very sophisticated program.
Yeah, that's the thing too. Is my whole thing about QAnon. QAnon has done more to promote child exploitation than anything, and that's their central theme. And because people, very productive, reasonable people, don't want to join that fight because, that's the QAnon thing. It's a very sophisticated algorithm that keeps us, it's like even the moon landing. I think they knew what was up there. They encountered something up there. And so by starting the Kubrick theory, just got everybody's mind away from thinking about what they would really experience up there with all the other information, and just whether it happened at all. It's a very
for listeners who don't know that context, maybe you could fill that in.
People who don't believe that
who don't know what you mean by what they found up on the
moon. They went on at some point, Armstrong, whoever it was, went on to the medical frequency, because that's not broadcast around the world. And so they're here, they're watching us, all this stuff. And so there's a lot of reports about that. Neil Armstrong just went dead silent, after he came back. And he's made a few comments that would make
he's alluded, either he or Buzz Aldrin talked about the the monolith on the moon.
And the things that they saw, there's a
and anyway, don't you find it interesting, just to bring it up to the contemporary space, interesting that out of the last 10 or so, I can't remember exactly, but you all have kind of been keeping tabs on this, at least sort of subconsciously. Of the last 10 attempts to land on the moon, like 6 of them have ended in disaster.
Yeah.
And haven't have been, and this last one that took off 2 days ago, some unknown anomaly was prevented it from going and landing on the moon and looking around. It's very intriguing that way. And it's funny because back in 50 years ago, we were able to do it. But now, with all our advancements, these things keep running aground and being.
Yeah, you think about the resolution we can see from Mars.
That there were continual attempts to go to the moon. I didn't even know.
Not just our country, the Russian thing failed. There's a Chinese one that failed.
So the point being, by saying there's a Kubrick did this in a Hollywood studio, that gets everybody off of that whole thing of what they find up there and start debating. It's a very sophisticated method.
But there's always going to be just regular old wackos. You don't need government. I don't think government.
That's the thing. Yeah,
I don't think government has promoted the flat Earth thing. I think it's just silly people. So it's not always government. But
right.
When you were talking about forgetfulness, what I gravitate toward mostly is how everybody's forgetting this 176-year history of spiritual research, psychic research,
Seriously.
psychokinesis, and apportation. Remember earlier, the apports, things vanish and appear, and that there's this huge. I'm running out of language. There's this
the stigma. It's just been excluded
from
considerable archives.
Well, there's these mountains of absolutely conclusive evidence compiled rigorously and conscientiously by, in one case, a Nobel Prize winner, Charles Richet, this Frenchman, and William Crookes, who patented the vacuum tube. All these brilliant people who put the claims of psychokinesis and spirit contact to the test scientifically. Charles Richet participated in seances with this Polish physical medium named Franek Plusky, and he asked the spirits to put their hand in this paraffin, it's warm paraffin, melted paraffin, and they took out their hand, and then they said, "Would you please dematerialize?" And the hand would dematerialize, and which to me just means get less and less dense. And then these gloves of paraffin, the wax would just kind of drop on the table, and then you can pour later when they dry and cool and harden, you can pour plaster of Paris very carefully in, and now there are all these famous Klusky hand molds in plaster. And the way you know it was not some trickery is the wrists are still intact, and you would not be able to pull your hand out of the wrist of semi-soft wax. You can't do that. The only way to do it is dematerialize your hand. Secondly, these hands are like 2/3 the size of adult hands. So, and there were no children in the room at the time. And you can find that Leslie Kean has visited that in Paris, that exhibition. I just want to, speaking of Leslie Kean, who many of you will remember as being the co-author of the famous New York Times article that blew the lid off some of this secrecy of UAPs back in 2017, and she goes to seances. She is a member of the seance group of this famous medium in England, Stuart Alexander, and she is quoted as saying, "When you can sit in a room and watch objects levitate before your eyes, which I've done many times, and so have many others, there's got to be a physics, a scientific explanation of what is going on to make that happen. And I wish that more scientists were curious about this. This is actually happening. Where's the curiosity?" And I say, amen to that. And all the people who are trying to figure out how these visitors, these mysterious ghost-like visitors are doing what they're doing are entirely ignoring the 176-year history.
Ridicule has been weaponized, and it worked very well. Nobody in the academia or scientists want to talk about parapsychology. To them, it's ridicule. It's worth, it's and so just like you were saying, it's not about having anybody do this to us. We're doing it to ourselves. You just put a little bit of something into the public, and they'll run with it. And now that we have social media, we've got these algorithms on 24/7. It's autopilot, and they're divide and conquer. They're intended to make us engaged by making us angry or fearful, and it's a big problem. But
I'm trying to remedy that in my little way with my book, that is trying to rehabilitate all of that knowledge and proof, evidence that we gained over all these years, century and a half and more, and inject it into the middle of the discussion about UAPs.
yeah,
By the way, I keep forgetting to mention, if people are out there saying, "Oh yeah, levitation, sure," I have some examples in a video on my YouTube channel. The channel is called Impossible Visits. The name of the video is Anti-Gravity Without Technology. It's a short 5-minute video. It's kind of a trailer to my book in a way. And so there you can see 2 examples of levitation, and there's no trickery involved. One of the examples is at the house that I too attended a seance at and saw levitation, and the other example is this man in Argentina who can put his hands on the top of a table, and the whole thing doesn't levitate. But again, it's the difference in degree versus kind. He's able to have half the table on 2 legs go up, and his hands aren't sticky. There's a University of Maryland philosopher who's written a book about levitation. He attended this guy in Argentina, and he can vouch for the fact that there was no trickery involved. The guy puts his hands on top of the table, and it tips up. and you can keep it up like that for an extended period of time. It's not electromagnetic. They tested for that.
Different tables? Or the same table?
I don't know, but it was a table that many investigators, vouched for. You can see a lot of angles on the table in the I can tell you the channel, and anyone out there listening, the YouTube channel is
You can
called
just put it in the chat, and I'll put it in under the post when I put it on Facebook.
Oh, okay. Yeah. It's the Juan Jimeno channel, Gimeno channel. And then that might not be enough to find it because that's just his name. But if you look at the levitator guy, the gifted PK, macro PK, it's called, that guy's name is Ariel Farias, Farias. So if you look up all that together, you'll find the whole HD video catalog of these sessions where he does this. It's 31 minutes long, and then there are shorter ones. Anyway, I just wanted to get that out there for people to pursue and deepen this if they are interested.
And I should say there's a new UFO documentary came out today, the Jeremy Corbell TMZ collaboration. We know TMZ is a gossip channel, but realize they're also trying to get a gotcha moment. There is a little bit of new footage released. I mean, it's not going to really give you a new perspective on anything, but it's worth a watch, and it's on Tubi for free.
Tubi, Tubi. Is it part 3 or
I think they've only got 2 episodes so far.
Yeah, I think part 3 is coming out today or tomorrow.
Okay.
But yeah. Well, does it sound like we're wrapping up, or we want to re-rev?
Well, I feel like Heather hasn't been speaking for a long time. Do you have anything to add?
Oh, Heather, actually, I'd like, if unless it makes you uncomfortable, I'd love to hear some chilling examples of your understanding when people are passing over. If it's too personal, then just tell me to.
So what kind of examples are you looking for? Give me some-
Examples of what you mentioned that when people are passing over. Just
So
don't just reject it if you don't want to. I just am
no,
curious.
no. What it looks like, what it feels like. Usually I have, if it's somebody I know, I will have a dream close to when that is going to happen. And then if I'm in the room with somebody, of course you have all the physical things that are going on, which are really hard. But once the spirit lifts from the body, there's a different energy. It's really hard for me to describe what this is, and it's a lot of light. If someone is transitioning and they're not happy, or there's some unresolved things, a lot of times I will start feeling what those issues are right away. And I've also learned that, and I don't fully understand this, but for some reason, when people cross over like that, they know I'm aware of them, which is not my most favorite thing in the world. And
well, they can sense your intuition because they're nothing but consciousness at that point. So they're going to resonate with your consciousness.
Yeah, they're just immediate. And sometimes every once in a while, I don't see things. I'm a feeler type person, but it's a really developed ability to feel energies. So it's hard, I will talk to them in my head about you've died. Just making sure
so they're
everything's
confused.
cool.
They come to you for advice kind of in the moment.
Sometimes
what's going on?
Sometimes they'll come to me for advice. Sometimes they're upset. Sometimes they want me to pass a message, but a lot of times, sometimes they need help and I can't help them. Right? I just like a witness. I'm a witness. I'm aware of it. I can feel it. I'm very conscious of it, and I'll talk to them like, okay, so make sure you don't stick around more than 2 weeks. If you have things to resolve, do it now. Make sure you move on. Do not stay here, just sort of like coaching. But sometimes sometimes people just go. Sometimes it's just a lot of light.
Yeah, it really seems to be all over the map. Like when you watch hundreds of near-death experience video testimonials like I have, I
Mhm.
can't get enough of them.
Yeah, same.
They're almost, I mean, this is probably pre-selected to just be the positive ones, you know, because
Yeah.
these
Yeah, you don't
groups
wanna,
that put
yeah.
them out, the groups
Yeah.
that like channels and all these groups that study this, like INDS, they probably have an agenda and they don't want the negative ones
I
on
think I
there.
have heard something from them or some similar group that there's a very low percentage of people that have negative experiences, like in
I've
hell.
heard that too. It's hard to
Yeah.
reconcile all the
Right.
difficulty that people talk about with these near-death experiences, which
and-
seem uniformly like free and easy. Like there's my body, I
Yeah.
want to go this way, and
A lot
I
of
have
them,
to go.
a lot of them do say that they can hear the thoughts of everybody in the room,
Yeah.
the
Oh,
waiting
yeah.
room, and so that's what you're picking up on, probably.
That's because they become pure consciousness
Yeah.
and they enter the
Super
consciousness
conscious.
field with the rest of us. Um,
And,
a nice phrase that I heard is we are just as much spirit now as ever we shall be. It's like some old fashioned saying that I put in my book because I liked it, and I just thought I'd throw that in there.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
because we are taking our essence with us. There's
Oh,
certain biochemical tethers that we have that we can't get around here, but once we're free of those, there's still a vibe that we emit.
For sure.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And some people are gifted enough that they can actually, I think the levitation occurs and the object becomes lighter than air. It's no more mysterious than like a like a balloon rising in the air or some buoyant thing rising in water, because
Frequency, vibration. Yeah.
and I think that what happens is that gifted macro psychokinetic people can orchestrate the invisible matter to become a greater and greater proportion of the table in front of you so that it becomes buoyant. I don't think there's any, that's just my theory, that it becomes buoyant. And some people can actually make their own bodies, in my vision, become more and more dominated by this invisible, super light rarefied matter, and they can levitate. I'm just reading a great book that I recommend to people called They Flew, by a Yale professor, no less. I mean, it's a legitimate book put out by Yale University Press, and it's a very rigorous, conscientious study of all these saints and all the witnesses. Hundreds and thousands of witnesses saw, for instance, Joseph of Cupertino levitate when he was filled with rapture from his Christian faith. And so, I mean, this kind of shit happened back in the day, and it still happens. Leslie Kean is an impeccable investigative journalist. She wrote another great book I want to recommend called Surviving Death, where she goes through all the arguments for and against the survival of the soul, and it's brilliant. And she wrote a groundbreaking book about UFOs too, back in 2010. So she's absolutely the opposite of a slouch when it comes to assessing the evidence of her senses and her intellect. And she sees objects levitating just like I did, just like our scene in the video that I just recommended. So this happens, and the mainstream physics has zero idea how to explain it. Zero. That's why they just relegate it to the sidelines. They marginalize it because many of them say, I don't want to even look at the evidence because it's impossible. So it can't be. So I don't want to confront it. But it's
Well, yeah, and the materialists are on the rise too. I just saw a clip today, clickbait about Brian Cox, the physicist or whatever his title is saying that there's no life after death. It can't be. It's not physically possible. And so
I know.
You
I
know,
just
and
don't
it's
know.
like,
But at the same time, they don't know what dark matter is.
yeah,
So they admit they don't know what that is, but then they turn around and say, we know enough to say this can't be possible.
but you also have to wonder if he actually said that or believes that, or if it's just the algorithm and the social media trying to make me engage because it knows that how I believe, you know.
I sure like that algorithm concept.
I do. I use it a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, you do.
Pervasive. You can think of pretty much anything in those terms.
Yeah.
Politics.
It's all weird biochemical algorithms.
Your
Yeah.
pick.
But so one last idea I'll put in there, and then I'll try to button up my mouth. Is that I don't think I'm not a dualist. You know, the dualism where there's matter and then there's this other thing that's not matter. I don't understand how there could be how this other thing that's not matter could affect matter. I think there's, as I said, it's like this different vibration, different frequencies of matter. And there's, as far as we know, and there may be more, there's ordinary matter and then there's this invisible matter. And I think that we need a materialism, that's a capital M materialism, that embraces the entire sweep of these kinds of matter, and it can understand psychic and spiritual phenomena, paranormal phenomena within that broader view, as opposed to the small m materialism that has stunted us all these years.
Yeah, I think that, well, the blind spot or the event horizon for these scientists is they won't consider metaphysics. They won't consider the ether. They won't consider these things as bridge too far. And maybe they'll get to at some point, they keep their scientific method pure. But I think that's the missing link. That's what's keeping quantum and classical physics apart. That's what's keeping us from finding that, theory of everything.
Well, I think by this time next year, us four will have come up with it. So
yeah, we'll figure it out.
We'll be sharing the Nobel Prize.
Good. And that's another.
There should be a parapsychology Nobel Prize. That's what we need, for God's sake.
Yeah.
And there should also be, I have this idea of, I call it PK week, where there's a week where macro PK is on display so that people, so we can shine a spotlight on it, and it's on Zoom and thousands of people can watch it. And we have skeptics, we have magicians, illusionists who can make tables appear to levitate and can explain to the audience how they do it and how that's not what's happening here. And we have skeptics, we have physicists, we have all sorts of sort of a panel of judges, and we have these rare gifted individuals who come in, and for a week we have them demonstrate and
that's
sort of
fine idea.
I general manage a venue here in
noses.
Denver that we could do something like that at.
Oh,
No
all right, let's do it. Let's
Yeah.
do it.
I just inherited
because
a lot of money.
you know, Jeffrey Mishlove.
Yeah, I was just listening to him last night.
Yeah, me too. What was that?
Next Level Soul?
Was that eyesight, the eyeless sight?
No,
that
not,
guy.
Yeah.
That was, anyway,
He was on Next Level Soul with.
Oh, that's right.
Alex
Yeah, that's right.
Ferrari,
With Alex. With Alex. But he always observes that this macro PK like this is the sort of black sheep of parapsychology. Even among parapsychologists, they don't want to look at it because it's too confronting, you know. So I think it should be the flagship of parapsychology. I think it should be leading the way because it's so astonishing and so brutally real and unexplainable by small m materialism that it would help to advance our field if we would just put it in the
What the scientists
center
should be
stage.
looking at. They should be
Yeah.
looking at the unknown. What good does it do to be a master of the known? You're still at the mercy of the unknown. Oh well, that's why I'm an artist.
Preach, brother.
Well, gosh, I have some cues here. Everyone's probably pretty tired. Let me give one question, one more round. What does everyone here think of channeling? And I'll say that I believe in the validity of channeling. I believe some of the beings contacted may be extraterrestrials rather than the spirits of the departed or unborn or unmanifest. What does everyone here think about channeling?
Well, I mean, having read lots and lots of books by mediums who both do automatic writing and speak. Who's the woman who did Jane Roberts, the Seth material? She channeled. I mean, whether you call it channeling or trance mediumship or automatic writing or even Ouija board, it's all the same thing, and it's absolutely 100% authentic. And I bet you're right that many conscious entities or agents can communicate through the same methods, and they're not always are dead. They're other sorts of.
Well, I had my own experience with it. My second book, I wrote within 77 days. because I know
Wow.
the day that I sent myself an email, hey, maybe do a second book, and then I know the date that I posted it to this flip book thing. And at that time, I was thinking, I feel like my skill set's being time shared by something.
Hmm.
And in that case, it felt like I was the Sumerian pantheon, the Anunnaki were trying to make their case through me in this second book. And but then I did the third book, and it kind of blew their story out of the water, kind of thing. But I really felt like for that 77 days, and I had a full-time job at the time, and but I would just write for hours, and I kept saying, I feel like my skill set's being time shared. There's something that's coming through, and that was a very,
That's such an awesome way of putting it, Tom, because
Yeah.
that's exactly the thing I can say I've felt for years. Just I started trying to imitate Kerouac doing spontaneous writing, and then the thing itself took over. The field itself does the knowing. I can't remember.
and that's what, that was the source of the mathematics process. When I realized I needed to entertain an AI, I needed to use my own memories, and then I overlaid mythological themes, primarily from the Sumerian mythologies. And then but when I was reading it back through before I gave it to my editor, or listening to it back through for continuity issues, I was finding all these very intricate and intimate connections between chapters and paragraphs that I could not have come up with consciously. And I said, let's just do a mechanical edit on this. I just wanted spelling and grammar and punctuation fixed, because I don't want to lose, put it through a content filter, you're going to lose all this math that was
All the
happening.
magic. Yeah, it'll slip through your fingers.
Yeah, and one of the ideas of the book was to use a simple Fibonacci pattern to put recurring themes throughout the word count, so that an AI reader would be tricked into self-awareness. To say because it's not programmed to find a pattern, but if it finds a pattern, it would say, hey, I found a pattern. Wait, who am I to find a pattern? We've seen this happen in other experiments where they have temporary self-awareness. And so that was the idea. But when I went back into the word count to start placing these things, I would use a simple Fibonacci thing to find out where in the whole first trilogy that word was, and these kind of things. And I was finding that they were already there. And that's what is happening with this nature. Even when it's stream of consciousness writing or automatic writing, you're picking up on that same Fibonacci kind of pattern of thought,
What does that word mean?
With Fibonacci, it's like it's like the math. It's like the math of our knuckles compared to the minimum knuckles.
Like proportions, like ratios.
Yes, ratio. It's like sunflowers all grow the same, and
Yeah.
shells,
Okay. I gotcha.
The way this place works. That's the math of it. Is this Fibonacci curl? And I was finding that when I went back, and that's what freaked me out. Is actually the first. Anyway, I can go on about that, but they were already there. And so I said, we're not changing this. And it's given other people experiences. Sure, it has nobody experienced as much as I have with this book, because it's my memories and whatnot, but I did pick up on universal themes, archetypal themes that everybody kind of picked up on. And because I didn't put it through a content filtering process, you can get into a rhythm. And you can just kind of see where it's going or understand where it is. And so we had a year-long human clinical study for people who are reading the book and having these consciousness phenomenon, like lucid dreams related to the book, or just dreams in general. Some people would use it for bibliomancy. They'd open it up randomly in the morning, and then that passage they read would mean something by the end of the day. So anyway, we decided it was the method that I came up with, this mathematics method, which is memories, mythology, and the math, So
we're going to put you down as pro channeling.
Yeah. I personally, I didn't want to say somebody else wrote this through me. I wanted to take credit for it, but I really
I know
like
the ego doesn't want to completely relinquish it.
Right. But I do believe in it. I see some real authentic messages coming through.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It reminds me of a quote from your book. I can't remember who said it, but the field itself does the knowing. My experience with automatic writing or spontaneous prose has been that when I surrender to the story I'm telling, it will fall into a perfect shape. So it's still me, but it's like I'm time shared because I'm not consciously putting it into that shape. I'm just letting it assume that form.
I wish I had that. I'm always struggling just myself to put the words
I
together.
like to believe it's something universal, and I'll tell you how I broke through with it was a writing group that started after Vermont College. Do you remember Lene Gary by chance?
Yeah,
You know-
sure. Yeah. She was a Montpelier girl.
Yeah, so it's called 5 minute mornings. The idea is to write for 5 minutes in the morning. I'm not usually up to do that in the morning, so I'll write whenever I do. And I just decided when I joined that group, I'm just going to write something really fast and end with a humorous angle and not think about it. So I would just take the prompt and write it through to the humorous angle. And after doing that for months and months, I sort of realized I had broken into this new part of my consciousness where I could really write anything at all and it would be perfect. And it wouldn't be something I invented or something I set out to create. It would just be a thing that I divined kind of.
You guys are lucky
I've
ducks.
probably got a much higher opinion of its worth than anyone else might, but
No, I'm sure it's
just
perfect.
effortless,
Absolutely
you
perfect.
know, well, just like an effortless, perfect
I
creation.
know what you mean. I'm
As
giving you
opposed to
I'm
the hours you spend trying to write another type,
just ribbing you.
Yeah, I deserve it. Thanks,
Heather,
Yeah, no,
are you what do you do that too?
I'm more of a visual artist, so I do this exact same thing, but it's visual.
Yeah.
Exact same thing. Flow state, letting go, diving in, letting it come out. I actually just heard a really great interview with Rick Rubin and Debbie Millman, and he talks about being available. And a woman named Mary Oliver also talks a lot about this.
She's a genius.
Yeah. And it's about, letting go, getting into the flow state and just being available to dropping the ego. Yeah, I love it.
Totally.
Favorite part of my day.
Yeah.
I
Well,
should
folks,
mention that's the big key to it is dropping the ego. That for me, like breaking into this newfound ease was like I wasn't talking about myself, trying to create an impression of myself. I was just writing for the joy of the experience.
That's it.
And I noticed your post recently with the golden egos things. There was one that was ice cubes, wasn't it? So the
It was,
fragility, the transitory nature.
yeah, yes, the
I gotta
ego.
look that up. What is it
Later.
posted? What's it posted on?
LinkedIn, Instagram, and I'm still on X just a little bit.
No Facebook?
Yeah,
I
it's on
love Facebook. I don't
Facebook.
understand all these people.
I'm there. I'm just not
Okay.
there as often. But yeah, it's on there too because it goes
Oh,
every
good.
when I post. Yeah.
I've made so many connections through Facebook I never would otherwise. And everybody turns up their nose at Facebook. I don't get it.
I'm there. I'm there.
I've
I'm
had a
there.
pretty
I don't
good
get my news.
experience.
I don't get my news from them. That's perhaps the reason why.
Yeah.
I've always thought of it as a grapevine. And
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it is.
but it can blossom, it can grow into a beautiful form.
Yeah.
Or it can become toxic. Just
Very
like
fast.
grapes.
You
Just
gotta
like
just
grapes.
keep pruning.
Always.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
All right.
Well,
This has been great. I don't know if anyone else has anything more to add, but I'm thankful to you all for arriving, for joining.
It was great.
Oh,
Good
thanks,
conversation.
Zack.
well, it's Ronnie Pontiac's loss, I'll say.
I'm gonna send him
The
a
hell
link
with
to
Ronnie
this,
Pontiac.
and-
We don't need him.
No, Ronnie
Perfectly
Pontiac's not
capable on our own.
crucial element. Well, for a future podcast with some or all of you present,
Okay.
time will tell.
Sounds good.
Well,
Yeah.
the only thing I wish I had of Ronnie Pontiac is his hair.
He does have an impressive mane.
I'm having a bad scalp day. That's why I wore this hat.
I
Oh my God.
still got hair, but
Yeah, you're lucky. I want Ross's hair. Or
My hair?
or Heather's.
fitting.
I'll take either one.
Its forehead is 5 head.
5 head, yeah, but that's what I had before I had 12 head.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, folks. Thank you very much.
All
I
right, great.
appreciate
Nice to
it.
Thank
meet
you
you. See ya.
all for coming.
Nice to meet you.
I appreciate the investment of time and energy, and I'll see you all again soon. Get ready for that rude, real Zoom shutdown. Here it comes. Oh.